soir dans le cadre d'un cycle de 4 conférences, donc la 3e de ce cycle de 4, qui a été organisé dans le cadre du 10e anniversaire d'un double diplôme franco-allemand partagé entre l'école d'architecture de Strasbourg et le KIT de Karlsruhe. Donc nous accueillons ce soir dans ce cadre monsieur Renzo Vallebuona, j'espère que je n'écorche pas votre nom, architecte d'origine italienne, installé en Allemagne, donc il va certainement nous emmener, je vois déjà une map monde, donc nous emmener très loin certainement, et je vais laisser Dominique Leininger peut-être aller un peu plus loin dans la présentation. En tout cas, merci à tous d'être là, bienvenue à vous et bonne conférence.
Merci beaucoup.
Oui, donc ich sag's mal auf Französisch,
ja,
wir kennen uns ja gut. Und bon, je vais peut-être vous introduire un peu dans l'œuvre, et surtout aussi un peu dans une sorte de curriculum qui est assez important de Renzo Vallebuona, qui a fait des études à la faculté d'architecture de Darmstadt. Donc, où donc après là en parallèle travaille déjà dans des agences à Milan et aussi à Francfort. Il a donc à ce moment-là aussi déjà créé, ça j'ai voulu lui demander peut-être après, une agence avec Renza Pitton à Udine, en Italie. Après, il était aussi architecte, chief designer, comme c'est marqué, dans l'antenne berlinoise de l'agence Stirling, Wilford Stirling, qui avait donc à l'époque une agence à Berlin, donc tu étais déjà intégré là. Et après, tu as donc avec la collaboration avec Walter Nägeli. Tu as donc travaillé aussi sur un très grand projet très connu de Stirling. Wilford Stirling, c'était Braun Melsungen, un grand projet où donc il y avait une étroite collaboration entre vous deux et qui a donc mené vers une fondation de l'agence avec Walter Nägeli à Berlin ensemble pendant quelques années. Et après, vous vous êtes séparés. Après un certain temps, je sais pas, pour se retrouver donc dans une autre structure, avec ton partenaire Alexa Steger, qui est ton associé, et fondé l'agence VAST à Düsseldorf, dans laquelle tu œuvres aujourd'hui encore, et qui est un peu voilà aussi sûrement les projets qu'on va voir. En termes d'enseignement, parce que l'idée de ce cycle, c'est aussi de croiser le regard entre enseignement et pratique. Donc j'ai vu que tu étais prof invité à Harvard pendant quelques temps, et aussi à la AA à Londres. Et comme on a bien vu là avec Claire Carsanti, et également à la TU Berlin, où tu as enseigné pendant 2 ans, je pense, 2 Jahre, à Berlin, et aussi à la ETH Zurich. Donc on va un peu fréquenter du beau monde en termes d'établissement, de tout ce qui est enseignement d'architecture. Et depuis 2012, tu es donc maintenant professeur à KIT, ordentlicher Professor, comme on dit en allemand. C'est toujours très drôle ce mot, ordentlicher Professor. Et donc, tu es maintenant dans le département. Alors, j'ai essayé de le traduire, peut-être je l'ai dit en allemand. Déjà en allemand, c'est pas un mot si simple. Donc, en allemand, ça s'appelle konstruktive Entwurfsmethodik. Alors, je le traduis avec méthodologie de conception constructive. Je sais même pas si ça fait un sens, mais admettons, c'est ça. Mais peut-être pour le dire autrement. Autrement, ça veut dire tu es quand même quelqu'un qui est transversal et qui surtout essaye d'intégrer dans ton enseignement les disciplines connexes, comme on dit en français, donc surtout avec tout ce qui est la construction, l'ingénierie et aussi les matériaux, pour trouver là, je dirais, donc un vrai travail qu'on va voir sûrement maintenant à travers ta conférence, comment l'architecture et la construction et les matériaux font un ensemble et comment dans cette complexité tu vas donc nous présenter un peu tes approches et aussi je pense, ta philosophie de projet et d'enseignement. Voilà, je te laisse la parole. Vielen Dank fürs Kommen, merci beaucoup. Et maintenant, on est donc très content voilà, entendre de toi plein de mots intéressants et de projets, voire de projets intéressants.
Très Thank you very much. Does it work? Okay, so I try to, I can't show everything we've done and nothing, a real show of our work, because it takes no end. And so I decided to show you just very little, just 4 pieces. We've done 2 parts of the work, of the everyday work in our office, and 2 others who have done with students. Because there's always been, for me, quite clear the necessity, as you've seen from my curriculum. I've been sort of a big promenade architectural in terms of being in every single university in the world, more or less, and sort of combining always the work I do, which is very, very experimental normally, with the work at the university. And so I show you a couple of things from the last years, and we began with this sort of big question, sort of involving the whole world, and it's about the human impact on the planet. And it sounds like a very simple question, but it arises many other questions too, because this is a result, the human impact is a result of many other things, like the density or urban agglomerations in certain parts, and the connections and transport and interface between the different countries and cultures, and roads and telephone lines and electricity and all that. But it's all, in the end, it's all concentrated always in the same places. And our first question, which is part of also my philosophy, but the first question we used a little bit, it was like an alibi for beginning to work at the university in these last 6 years or something, was, okay, can we as architects do something to cope with this situation, which is not really easy to solve, that this concentration of population is always on the same, it's focused on certain parts of the world, it's becoming worse and worse, and other parts are in remote areas, and they kind of decay. So the dark ones, the dark brown ones, are the most populated ones, and there's a lot of very, very light areas also, which are not really properly populated. And if we take, for instance, on the left side, Europe, we have a kind of equilibrium in the distribution of the density. If we take Germany, it's also very well distributed with very little. Oh, what happened? Okay. Okay. And in Germany, for instance, there is just little exceptions like Düsseldorf and Cologne and Berlin and a couple of cities. They get a little bit darker. But if we take Pakistan or Bangladesh, they are completely dark. So there are no places to live in. And we try to cope, we decided to use the possibilities, the technical possibilities, our expertise also at the university to create or to say, look for new strategies to build in remote areas. It's a very simple thing, but it's kind of title of the work. So, of the work we did last time. So the first step, we said, okay, we'll go to a very, very remote place. And we landed in the middle of the Sahara. It's a kind of personal thing because I just knew I like the desert. So I met once a nomad who inherited an oasis, and this oasis was very close to the border to Algeria in Morocco, and so we went there. And an oasis is a quite complex thing. It's not only a part of the desert where you luckily have water, but it's also it's a kind of treasure, but it's not only yours. So you have a lot of there's lots of regulations that you have to cope with. You have to go with them. So you have to manage to give the nomads water and give them shelter and give food to the camels, but you have also to organize your oasis to allow animals to get there during the day, other animals during the night, and all that. And but this oasis was not structured. Nobody had been there really, so we made a deal with this guy, and we said, okay, we make the master plan for that, and we begin to build with you, and you organize the people and all that. So we made sort of kind of joint venture, and we planned at the university that was in Karlsruhe. This work is from the last years, and so we planned with the students. We made a sort of competition, and in the end, none of them was really fantastic. So we combined some of them, and we studied the historical systems to build in the desert and all that. And so we worked a whole year on that, and preparing more or less also the empirical things, the techniques and all that, but also the more theoretical work and the culture. And in the end, we invented systems to sort of use water for cooling and systems like that. But the real problem we found out is the way people build today in those areas. So this is in Casablanca or something, and it's the problem with that is it's not only an aesthetical problem, but it's a cultural thing. So it's built with concrete blocks and corrugated metal sheets. So during the day, it's like an oven. It's absolutely hot. So the people do not use it because they can't stand these temperatures within the building, and they use the place outside the building. And during the night is fucking cold. So they do not use it again. So in the end, all these buildings are just used, as you see, just used as sort of a shelter for materials and all that. But the next building, which is going to be built, is going to be built in the same way. And it's a long story, but we found out why these traditional systems get lost. But it's a too long story. Anyway, it's related to the way this knowledge gets transported to the next generation. It's only verbal. And if your relatives or your friends or your sons, they do not work do not want to work the way. Do I have to?
You just have to touch it.
Do I have? This is okay. Okay. If they do not do the same thing you were doing your whole life, it gets lost because nobody knows. And in the end, there is people interested, lots of Germans also, interested in these old techniques. And we gather some engineers and architects, and we did a sort of, how do you call that, full immersion seminars, whatever. It's a workshop on the place that was in Marrakesh for a whole week. And the students, my students, the whole group of students that went there and they did the whole work and learned how to cope with that and how to do this work and how long it takes, and you get a feeling for that. And they built walls and vaults and all that, so it was quite, they were quite fast. So that's why I'm so optimistic for the Chukrut. Yeah. And then we, after that, after this time, we went to that place in the desert and began to gather also the materials to do that, and we began to work began to build. It was kind of the building site for us, which was a very nice experience for 2 weeks or something. And in the end, we had to leave, but the best thing was that we worked with the nomads of the place. So we did just the first step and integrated those people. It was very strange because we had to teach them what their own grandfathers did, and so but they got involved into this, and then they continued. Apparently they were not very happy with their own work because they just texted but never sent photographs of what they were doing. They probably went back to the corrugated metal or something, I don't know. But okay, that was a first sort of intention to work with low-key techniques, old low-key techniques, using the potentialities of the place. And it sort of nothing was imported in that case. We just knew a little bit, but in the end we used whatever we found on the place. And that's something we have lost also quite a lot in Europe. And so we go back to Karlsruhe. That's a very different context, but it's a very urban context. And it's this project is about this place in the middle with the diagonal building there and these two other things. It was a competition like 6 months ago, which we did with Henri together. And it's about these buildings, this tower and these two other, the one here on the bottom and the almost square one over there. And from the 60s. And the city decided to build a new tower over there. And the question is why? Because this building is still standing, and this is a recent photograph. And it's beautiful, I must say. So we decided to initiate a sort of discussion only. So we knew we were never going to win, but it wasn't our intention either. It was difficult to convince Henri to work on this, I must say. Yeah, he's very practical. So we decided to do a work which opens discourse to to see to which extent today, with our technological knowledge, we can negotiate this existing substance and reuse it in a certain way, and not just pull it down and make a new one. So this is just fine, yeah. So what we did was we took everything off, and we investigate different ways of using the concrete structure, and or reuse it, or whatever, and add other things, and partly reuse the materials we took down. So we reuse partly the whole glazing, and but most of the concrete structure remained. And what we did was to shorten the tower also to. We took something like 3 or 4 floors away to give the tower a new dimension, and also because with the floors we took away, this tower in juridical terms get to in a different category, so it's possible to build in wood. And so we began to think of introducing wood into a concrete existing structure, and we began sort of kind of recycle discourse, which led us to use this piece of wood, this existing building, and sort of just recover, sort of kind of put a new kind of coat on because the structure was already existing. So we had to do something to adapt that structure, that skeleton, to the new conditions which are needed for living or for offices. So in fact, we just a little bit like the beginnings. The beginning was the unité d'habitation in Marseille was kind of thought to be a skeleton in which you put these things, idealistic. And it's the same thing we did here. There are kind of boxes with a dwelling. Actually, we decided to put all the offices which were needed in terms of program in the other buildings, and kind of rename this tower and give the tower a new existence and bring the people to that place. So not to make this place very public and accessible to everyone, and even have people living in the same place and not just offices from the government. And so the one on the front is, for instance, is a tower which is apartments, and the offices are over there, but the garden which is around and between the buildings is accessible to everyone. So you see here in the middle there is this water garden, which is, well, it was a different thing also, to use the water for the cooling, and all this is course, but I don't need to explain that, I think. But what is very nice is that the whole ground floor was combined between private areas and public, so that the public areas kind of make this thing lively, and kids would play, and people would drink coffee, and you wouldn't be sort of working on a kind of in a sort of cemetery, like most of these places are, when a little bit like the effect of La Défense, where you have too many offices and no people living there. And yeah, that's the water garden on the bottom, which is accessible for everyone, and you would be working on your office above these gardens. And it's somehow similar. Is this the next project? That's very kitschy. Just to warn you, that's really very kitschy, but it's somehow interesting. This is in Mallorca, and it's a place which is UNESCO protected and very, very chic, very expensive and super cool, but very, very beautiful. And it has this. This is like the region where my family come from Liguria in Italy. So they have these dry walls and olive trees everywhere. And it's absolutely beautiful. And it's a very homogeneous, how should I say, it's actually a very artificial landscape. But it's very natural somehow, he has become very natural. It's like part of the landscape. And in the middle of this, there was this little house standing, and it was horrible. And but you see, the site is 9,000 square meters, so it's quite big. But it's not allowed to build there. And our clients, they didn't know. They just bought the whole thing, and they didn't know. It's absolutely not allowed to touch anything, and because it's UNESCO protected. And but this house was horrible, and that was somehow our advantage. And because the city authorities, they knew that, and we said, okay, we make a deal, and we build a new house there. We sort of we take all the cubic meters, the whole volume which is existing there. There are many. There's two, and there were other two little buildings there, and shelters. And so we make a sum of all of them, and we make a package. And with this package, you allowed us to build a new thing, which is not ugly. It's a very difficult. I got a medal for diplomacy. Yeah, that was very cool. In the end, they allowed that, and that was the best job I ever did, I think. And so we decided to. We found out in a place one of these walls they are very high. They are 3-4 meters depending on the topography, and was broken. So we decided to continue that wall and sort of kind of hide the house behind that wall. And so we began to plan a house which has almost no windows, and which is just kind of as a result of dealing with the topography. And in fact, the floor was just rock. That is the first version. But our clients, they were British, and they were very conventional. For them, it was a real shock. So we decided, okay, we're going to go further investigating that, and but then we realized what we need is this. Is this in technical terms, because on that place there was no water, no electrical current, no covering for the cellular phones, nothing. There was no gutters, nothing, absolutely nothing, and there was no permission to get ever anything. So we had to produce this and planted in that paradise, which is absolutely beautiful. So we had to deal with the site, and the first thing was to look for water. But you can't believe it. This Spain is just around the corner. But the only system they allowed us to look for water was to send this guy. He's holding a wooden stick. Yeah. And he found the water. I mean, I thought it was, in the end, well, it went well, but it was absolutely strange. For us, it was an adventure, but it was very kind of a nice experience. So we began to study the place in terms of water management, and so we have dwelled here. And we collect water. There's a road over there, and there we have the possibility, in extreme cases, that a van would come and sort of provide water. But it's very small, so it would be just to kind of for drinking. And but the whole water, the rainwater and all that, we collect all that, and we have these. There's another point here, but actually, this is just a kind of a sign. Actually, is this something like 4 times the volume of the house, and here there is another one which goes under the house, and here is the one which is already existing, and so we had to pass the water from one to the other, because as we have no gutter system, we had to recycle the whole water, and the water from the toilets goes to a place and gets filtered, and partly goes back and partly goes away. It's a different sort of like different small boxes in which it passes by. But the whole system was. Here you see the water goes down there, and there's another one over there. And so that at the end we have a volume of water which is big enough to support the system without getting too warm in the summer, because the filtering the filtering technique, it was just with plants and not with machines. So So this is part of the one on the top. So the water gets cleaned. That was just after the building site, so the plants are still very few. But it gets cleaned here, and it falls to the other one, and get filtered here. This is like a swimming pool, and it has different heights or depth also, so that the water gets filtered by different plants which need different depths of water as well. So, but it was always kind of dealing with the landscape and kind of respecting the landscape or using the landscape, and integrating these actually very sophisticated technologies, but they are very normal technologies, very low key. I mean, here is you see part of the beginning of the plantation of that, and the advantage of that thing is that the whole system works. But it doesn't work alone, so you have to use the water and you have to use the toilets and all that, otherwise the plants would die. And so every now and then we get mails. Do you want to spend a week or 2 weeks in Mallorca, because we have to leave? We are going to London or something, and so it's at your disposition. This is quite cool, actually. Yeah, but well, here you see it has almost no windows, but it's very, very light. It has sort of little courts in, but I didn't want to get into too much into the architecture of that thing, just into this strategy to work with the conditions of the place. And this last project is that's in Patagonia, in Chile, and which is wonderful. As you see, it's just fantastic. And it's a project we did as a second try of this developing techniques to build in remote areas. So we invented something for that area, for Patagonia, the very, very southern tip of South America. And that's a place which has a very special natural climatic conditions. So they have fauna and flora, which is it is only there in that place. So there's plenty of natural scientists going there, and we developed this project with scientists from Chile, from another university, and we began the same way, studying here in Karlsruhe, studying the weather conditions and developing sort of housing for scientists, and different, very, very different places and building strategies. As you see, there were many projects, and in the end we decided, because all the students were very happy with this project, and it went very well, so we decided, okay, we do some studies how that could work in the inside to allow scientists to stay there for a couple of days, because the distance is so big that normally scientists can just have a tent with them. But if you only have a tent, you have no fridge for the plants, or you have no microscope because you have no electricity and all that. So we decided to make also a kind of capsule which is autonomous. And for the first real experience, we went to a very similar place, which is Norway. It's exactly the same thing. It's just granite, cold, and there's fjords everywhere. It's very similar. So we went there, and the poor students had to, as a first experience, they had to survive one night in the woods in a place they didn't know. So some of them sort of took some high-tech materials with them, so this foil or things like that, and other ones, there were more sort of like Viking guys. They decided to build their own thing with the things they found on the place, which is also a very interesting strategy. And after all this experience, we decided, okay, we do this thing, we do it real. And so we got also some sponsoring and all that, and we began to build in real, one-to-one, this small building to be put somewhere over there. So we didn't know the place yet, but we had the possibility of putting this module, experimental module, on somewhere in that very cold and very windy place. So we had this combination of very low-key materials and techniques, like these wood frames and all that, and this very high-tech material, which is an alloy of aluminium and resin. And then again, we sort of went over to study mainly the wind in this case, to develop the facade, the panels which we wanted to have, and we had to invent also the anchoring for this thing, because normal anchoring wouldn't stand on that place. We did, I think it was like the 12th test, the first one, which really worked. And they're very heavy, these things, so they're but quite cool in the end. And but they are very simple, so that they can be taken away, they can be put by just one person, because that was a condition of the whole work, was very strange, was to decide to use only material which can be transported by one or two persons. Because there is no roads, there is no electricity, the same thing again, but there isn't even no roads. So you probably have to get with a boat somewhere and then walk miles with a kind of piece of wood or piece of window or whatever, and do the thing. So we built this building in a hangar in Karlsruhe. We used all these materials and all that. We tried everything. We tried also in the factory. I made a test and all that. And in the end, we had to develop also water management system to use rainwater. In fact, all the cladding is used to collect the water and recycle the water within the building. And so every time you go there, which is very, very remote, you get provided with water, so you can. And this work was all done by students, and every single thing was done by them. It was built, and they built it up completely, and then they put it back to pieces again, dismantled the whole thing, put it in a container, and they shipped it down to South America. And there we go. We got there. And at the end, it was in very different places, and in the end, we were close to this area here. It's a very special place in which there is no, it's a harbor for fishermen, but they have no roads, and they have just catwalks in different heights, and it's very interesting. We are surprised how nice it is actually to. They're very respectful to nature, so they do not touch the earth. When you build a house there, you get the permission under the conditions that your house has pilotis and does not touch the earth either. So there is not a single road, it's just these things. And we got there, and these are the kind of linking catwalks from one house to the other. And we had to get with a boat, because the container was put somewhere else, and we had to take the piece by piece from the container on a boat and get the river, down the river to this fjord, and then go up the fjord until we got there. And this building, which is very simple. It has an entrance and it has a shower at the entrance, because it's a laboratory, and that place is very very dirty. You do not have normal conditions on the floor, but you have normally is granite, and there is a kind of 10 centimeters of sand. It's like grass or something, but sometimes it gets to 2 or 3 meters, and you don't see that. So you can fall into this thing, and the scientists, they use kind of neoprene things, and they get very, very dirty. And when they enter the building, they take a shower there, and then they use, the blue one is the wet laboratory, and the red one is the dry laboratory for computers and all that, and which can be divided in different parts, and it has kitchen, bathroom, and all that, and places to sleep, and everything is either out of wood or this aluminum material. So that was the place we got there, and all these things they had numbers, so we had to put them together. But as you see, the Chileans, they had made these pilotis something like 4 meters higher than they were thought to be. And we got that, this big surprise. It was just at the end of the world. And as you see, it's like, I don't know if you've seen the film Fitzcarraldo, but it was very, very close to that. Yeah, because we had to take these pieces, these enormous pieces, they were so heavy, and we had to sort of kind of pull them up. It was a nightmare. And it was raining. This is an absolute exception, because it was raining every day. And but in the end, we got all the material there, and so you can see it's sort of, and they're not, these poor things, these students, they were not paid. They just did it for fun, and they had fun, but as you see, it's quite a little bit dangerous in the end, and but it was fantastic with these fjords, and so we began to build this thing, and in the end was a kind of absolutely beautiful, because it worked really very, very good, and that is some weeks ago. I did not have actual photographs, but the idea of that is now is already there, this module, but it's still an experimental thing. So we are going to investigate. We are going to make a research with two other universities over there to develop some kind of insulation for having a little bit more comfort, and because also it's a very political thing. This country, Chile, has always been very straightforward with ecological questions since very, very long. And the new government has enormous budget for developing for increasing the quality of housing, integrating insulation, because normally they do not use insulation. It's like in the USA. This is just very little insulation. And the main point is basically using local materials and local technologies. So we are studying now. We're still in this sort of kind of coordinating all the work for these different types of insulation, which we're going to test on that building, because it's very easy to, it was thought to be for that, very easy to dismount and mount again. And we're probably going to use wool, because there are plenty of sheep over there, but they are used just for flesh, just for meat, because they the other work is too expensive. They are not competitive to the Asian countries. It's always like the economical forces and the political intentions are very difficult for us architects to kind of coordinate, and it's the same thing in the end, like the building in Karlsruhe, which is just political and economical forces which sort of manipulate the history of the city. And in this case, and normally wool gets burnt. They burn the wool because they do not use it for anything, and it's kind of industrial waste. So we're going to do something out of that, and that's the next step. Sorry, I did it very, very quickly because I think it's not worthwhile to talk forever on that. But I just wanted to show you a couple of things. So we're doing, and they're very, for us, they've always been very, very lots of fun, and we learned also a lot, and we have learned also quite cool people in other countries we didn't know, and I think it's good. I think students should take this very seriously also, to try to make things better, like we're doing. We're trying at least. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good one. Works? Yes, works. Thank you very much, Renzo. It was impressive. I always heard about the stories about Patagonia because we have been in contact a little bit this time, and it was quite incredible pictures you sent to me, and I didn't believe it that it could be possible to do this. But perhaps there are now questions. Oh, I hope so. And so we start perhaps with you, and then after.
You can also ask in French, not a problem at all.
Okay, I'm going to do it in English, so
okay.
The whole streaming is the same. So I have two questions. The important one is the second one. The first one is, you said about the loss of traditions in the desert and how they were oral and they don't have this kind of technologies. They don't go from one generation to the other. I think there is something else, but I don't know what you think about it. I don't know if it's because my father was a carpenter and he built his own house and everything. He was always taking care of his house. It was not once built and finished and expecting the decay of it. He was always taking care of his house, and he was not reconstructing it, but maybe, for example, in the southern countries, doing the calc again every year or every 2 years. And I think we have completely lost through this Anglo-Saxon constructive system. We have lost this idea of taking care of the buildings every year.
Yeah.
And I think that is also one of this idea. Somehow, what you showed in the last project, you are taking care of that again, and you're implementing it and changing it. And I don't know if you deal with this idea of care or of implementing variations on a real project. The second question is if the people in Mallorca need anyone to start the machine again and the water. I'm ready to go to Mallorca. And that's the important part. We can start with that.
Well, very kind of you that you're prepared to sacrifice yourself. Actually, but that's a real problem, I must say. Yeah, if you do not, if you sort of break the continuity of this thing in Mallorca, the system collapses immediately.
That's the current, and we have lost this idea of we expect things to work.
Yeah, yeah.
You're not involved.
I must say that was very difficult to convince our clients, but in the end they got more than convinced. They are absolutely fanatics of this thing. Yeah, they would never go back. They decided to. They had such a beautiful villa in London, and they sold it, and they sort of kind of they are convinced that's the thing, and that's very beautiful actually. But on the other side, it's the same thing as with the materials. I think to take care of something has been erased from our culture. I think now it's coming back. You see that in many students, and there is a different commitment towards the materials. And in Asia, you sort of all these temples which get dismantled, and they do not even rebuild the same dismantled building. They build it anew and leave the whole material aside to avoid these techniques, which are very, very difficult, these wooden carpenter techniques, to avoid them getting lost. And that's the only thing, the only reason why this has survived for hundreds of years. And if you take a detail of that joints or something, just dream. You know, it's not only perfect, but it's also a result of very, very long philosophical questions. Actually, this detail. I had such a beautiful photograph of a sort of pillory of stone, of granite, and has been sort of added to a column of wood. And it's very, very complicated. It's a very complex knot, and it has a tiny little square thing in the middle, in a certain place, and and that's a sort of it's like a nail of wood. So when the earth trembles and the building which is standing, this little thing, which is conical, sort of kind of flips out and falls down. And the whole building gets very elastic. It doesn't fall over because the elasticity is so big and it's very weak, but it's the best thing to kind of cope with this movement of the earth. And then when the tremble is gone, they go up, take this little thing and put it back, and then it's rigid again. But that's something which is not only a trick, it's a way of life in the end. And that's a very nice question, because if we had a bottle of red wine, we'd discuss the whole night about it might be better we do not have wine. Yeah, this is very beautiful. But or do you have questions? Yeah?
Yeah, I have one more question.
Sorry,
no, it's no problem. I just wanted to know, how long did you take with the students in Patagonia? Because it's a huge project. I just wanted to know a bit more about the frame.
The time frame,
yeah,
on the place itself,
yes.
Well, it took very long. It was far too long, but because it took us 16 days, and just 2 days there was no rain. Of all the others, it was really very, very cold, because it was just a couple of weeks ago. We just got back something like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and the days are getting shorter and shorter, because it's on the other side of the planet, and the days were very short, very cold, and was quite, because it was so rainy, and I tell you, it was quite dangerous as well. And the logistics was a nightmare, because we had to go with a boat and all that. It was so complicated. But it was was like really like Indiana Jones. There was an adventure. With absolutely all the guys who went there, they will go back. It was very beautiful, and it was. Well, this is very good also for students. I must say, the students who have done this, because I've done many of these projects. I've just turned two, but when they do these things which are real, they get very confident with the material, with the technologies, and with the possibilities you have, actually, and you do not have to take just aesthetical rules to create something, but you know the material, you know what you can do out of that, and sort of you have more possibilities. But in terms of time, in that case, we would have been the same 16 days or something, but we weren't really finished, and we couldn't finish because of that, because it was too difficult. Yeah, and so we have to go back, but there's plenty of interested students who want to go back, and. Now we are combining this with a sort of another project in which we, well, it's a long story, but just in few words, the German embassy in Chile is politically very active. It was so cool to work with them. And so they made a film of this thing. They went down with us and they made a film. And now they want to make a sort of kind of second project out of that, which is using clothes which are being dumped in the desert in Chile for I don't know how many, something like 20 years, from the whole world. All clothing, they are ended there, and there is this. They are called clothing mountains, and this whole landscapes of just clothing is weird. It's absolutely incredible, and we want to use that also for study or try to find ways of producing sort of insulation. And this cooperation with other universities over there has been forced by this by the German embassy. They are very collaborative in that. So the frame is still open, so we're going to continue.
Other questions? Yes. Yeah, it's a question and also a remark, because I studied in Karlsruhe like in the 80s, and it's about like this construction culture you give to the students. At the time it was with Fritz Haller, modular thinking, structural thinking, but I still remember that we went to the construction sites. We went also to the places where the folding machines were, and so you got the feeling for the material.
Yeah.
And so I wonder, is there this kind of tradition about how to build and how also to experiment to build?
Yeah.
How do you share it right now at the KIT? Because we had 2 weeks ago Moritz Störstelmann, who has a kind of different approach, but somehow it joins also what you could do about with, for example, construction with low-key materials, or with Dirk Hebel with about sustainability. So how do you work, let's say, about this kind of construction, construction culture at KIT? Do you work together, or what is the way now?
the KIT has an enormous advantage that is a very, very slow machine. So if you're fast, nobody notices. That's very cool, actually. You can do quite a lot. You have just to be fast and tell nobody what you're doing. Yeah, it works perfectly. And it's quite illegal. But everything I've done, these things I've shown you, they are not really legal. But so what in the end? But the advantage of the whole thing is that as I studied in Darmstadt, and it was very, very shishy. But we never even thought of going to a building site. Everything was just about aesthetics and sort of coolness and all that. And I think what is also my own thing to know what I'm building. Because I built quite a lot, and I like building. And normally we do the same in the office. In my office, we have we go to factories, and we had sort of kind of companies which allowed us to do whatever rubbish in their courtyard, and so we make quite a lot of experimental work, and but we do that also in the office. It's the same thing. We always trying to know where this point of no return, to which extent you can push a material to sort of make it if you know a material very well, you can reach much more and have much more fun in the end, because you are quite relaxed. But if you don't know that, you have no experience, no real physical experience with the material, you kind of you invent something, you invent a curve or a note or something which it doesn't work in the end. And I think it's an enrichment which is very nice to have also at the university. And most of my students, when they are young enough in their studies, when they are just beginning, and they make this experience, they get into another attitude. They sort of gain sort of confidence with these things, and when they draw a plan, they understand what they are drawing, and it's fantastic. It's part of the language, and I think is also very, very useful.
Are there other questions? I have one, but I give the question to students. No? Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering if you have a method when you go for a project in an international context, or like in some other culture, because I guess it's not possible to be an expert of every culture, every political questions. So what is, for example, what is the first thing you do in your project?
Wow, that's a cool question. I never thought of that. But that's very good. Yeah, I sincerely never thought of that. But it's a real. What do you think? I probably it's very important. I have no method at all, I must say. I think in that respect, I'm very Italian. I have absolutely no method. I'm very serious about the things I do, and normally people who know me, they're very confident. That's strange. These guys of this house in Mallorca, they risk their whole life. And yeah, for them, for us architects, we build and it's another building, and you have done some and you're going to do others, and it's a couple of millions, and you say it's okay, you don't have the money anyway. But for a client, it's a nightmare. They can't sleep, and in the end. I think one thing I should do, I should go through all the, that's very nice actually. I had to go through all the letters have become from clients. They're very nice. After the thing is finished. Never before. But after the finish, yeah, they're very, very beautiful. They are kind of, you feel like a hero. And I have also many letters from students. They're very nice. They're cool. And there must be something there that somehow people, I think when you're very convinced of something, and you your integrity is kind of very simple to read, because you are really very convinced you're not inventing, then people believe you. And that's something which I thought you would find it easily in the third world, for instance, like the guy of the oasis. That was just a conversation in the middle of the desert, which is still in my mind. The whole conversation was so beautiful, so we decided, okay, we do that together. It's just words, but words had for me, I still have very, very an enormous weight, and so he convinced me. But he relied on us that we would do something which is good for him, and is our work. Architects had to convince everyone in the end that things can be much better than the client ever imagined. And it might be a private client, but it might be also a city authority. And sometimes you get out of a sort of discussion with the people of the city authorities, and you have done so much just with words. You convince people to sort of rethink certain things and do them better. And I think it's not a big difference. That's why I'm always interested in these people who, like you are, these people who are teaching, but also building or thinking of architecture, because it's actually the same thing. It's sort of transporting a certain enthusiasm, if you want, to the others. And but I never done this in this. I have to think about this question. Thank you. Yeah, it was a cool question. It gave me to think. Yeah.
So, I have the last question. I don't know. Other questions? No. So, I wanted to know what about the competition, because not only to know if you have, I understood that you have not winning the prize, but is this competition, or is it right?
Yeah.
But what was the remark about your contribution for this? Because you have said there was a clear statement that we don't make the project like the client would to have at the end. So this is a kind of critical approach of how we do competitions today. So it's also a little bit like Henri Bava said, so we do this because we know already that we not will win this when we do this kind of critical approach. But because I say it also because I was last week on a quite nice colloquium in Freiburg about the city of tomorrow, and there was a kind of guy, he called Bernard Blanc, he's very known in France, from Aquitanis, it's the social housing company from Bordeaux, and he did this project, this Lacaton Vassal, and he didn't demolish all the big buildings, they should be demolished, and they said we took the structure like you did in the project of the competition, and we will do another project. We will do another project with a new facade in this kind of in-between zone, this loggia. And so on. So I think he was a very, very interested client, a very interesting, of course, architects. So there was a good combination of both. But we needed to go further in this kind of projects. But what is your experience about when we are approaching like that? That you said it, we have to be very convincing and to be very forward-looking. That we have other approaches in architecture and how we do also with existing building, because that's I think the very big issue for tomorrow. What we do with all this heritage. So, because you said already that is one of your kind of research also, how we do with existing structure and how we build a new skin for new buildings and so on. So the perhaps, but
I think that's probably it's more a German problem, because Germany has post-war heritage, which is enormous, and almost, I guess, in absolutely every single city there is buildings from that time, from the post-war time. Most of them might be rubbish, also very badly built because of poor technology or bad materials and all that. But it's still sort of part of our culture, and just to erase the culture is just like throw something away. And politicians, they need very often think which is more immediate. And what you're talking about, I can imagine a colloquium like you've been is much more interesting than talking just with politicians, because they want to have results in this period. They need, they need immediate support, and they do not. For them, it's just ridiculous to think in terms of kind of 30 years, because they are not going to be active in politics anymore. So they need this immediate reaction, and to produce what the politicians in the jury wanted. And they had more power in that case than all the other architects, because there was nobody like a real personality who would kind of establish a sort of a new line on that discussion of that jury. And the politicians, they wanted to have a new tower higher than the existing one, and that's it. There was no way of really discussing about that, because they could have done this to open discussion, which would have been absolutely fantastic for the whole city, but they didn't use this for this thinking of the future of the city, but just for immediate result. And there is, as soon as possible, there would be a big tower there, and it's a fate of architecture somehow to kind of and I think pieces of architecture, somehow I believe a little bit in the words of Louis Kahn, there is no good or bad architects, there are just good pieces of architecture. And that is a good one. And it's a pity it's going to be demolished just because the political conditions are not able to use that for a revival or rethinking of the architectural heritage of Germany? It's a very specific question. I think you do not have the problem here in France in that.
Yeah, we have a little bit in the with the grand ensemble, with this kind of 60s housing projects, these enormous. They are all a little bit in this how we do it, tabula rasa or not. That was also the.
Last year, it was tabula rasa better than change. I've been working with the social housing, and I've been rebuilt some tower or build grand ensemble, as we say in French.
Right.
And sometimes when they don't have the possibilities to change the use of the people who are living there, because they are all difficult people are put in the same place, and it's very crowded and awful. So they said, it's not because we have not able to affect this kind of people to this place. It's the place are not good. It's not a social problem, it's an architectural problem. So if they say that it's a social problem, les bailleurs, the people we are involved to social housing, said we are not good. So they are good. Anyway, it's not the problem of the social houses, it's a problem of architecture. So we put it down.
Yeah.
I think so.
I think it's very similar for us.
So I have a look on the watch. Yes, perhaps we can stop here if you agree.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So one more publicity. Alors la pub pour là dans 2 semaines, il y a encore une conférence, ce serait à Karlsruhe. Donc c'est Frédéric Müller qui va donc faire une conférence au KIT, comme c'est la dernière conférence dans ce cycle-là. Ça va être aussi le jeudi soir, donc dans 2 semaines. Voilà. Donc, voilà. Et après, il y a le 15 juin, comme on est déjà là, donc l'inauguration de l'exposition sur les 10 ans du double master franco-allemand avec le KIT, ou donc une grande exposition qui aura lieu dans le hall. Voilà, et qui après va aller donc à Karlsruhe aussi à partir du 12 juillet. Donc voilà, pour les festivités. Merci, Dankeschön für diesen schönen Vortrag.
You're welcome.
Et bonne soirée.